All right, good evening, everyone, and thank you for making the time to come along for tonight's presentation. Usually once a year, I give a free presentation on something, and this time around, it's about the business of permaculture. Now, the idea behind this is not so much about how to design. All right, it's not about the tricks and little bits and pieces with regards to how to actually make that happen. It is about the business side of things. So, actually, how can you turn around to make a bit of a living out of it rather than just having it as a hobby or something else? So, that's what tonight's presentation is really about. Now, before we even start, I'd like to acknowledge the First Nations people of this land and acknowledge their elders past, present, and emerging. And, with the knowledge that's been coming out over the last couple of decades with regards to the way the First Nations people sort of governed this large landscape and how we can actually learn from this so we can all live this regenerative and abundant future, and acknowledge the people of the lands where you're currently residing as well, as you're watching this presentation this evening. Okay, now when you're coming down to it, we're going to be looking, there's three different main strands that tends to come from. Now, I'm from the green field, but we'll get to that. So the first one is some people have a full-time job and they do permaculture consults or ideas as a hobby on the side. So they might do it occasionally on weekends or they might do it for friends. That's sort of the mainstay that a lot of people have when it comes to doing consult work or business within permaculture circles. The other one is people have lived their life in a different world completely, regardless of what it may be, and they're retired and they're coming back into permaculture, or they're coming into permaculture and they're giving back to the community. So there's a lot of stuff that can happen within that as well. And the third pillar that we're looking at is practicing permaculture as a career. That's where I'm at. So I've come into it probably as a professional about 11 years ago. I sort of saw that cliff and jumped off it and, haven't looked back. I won't say it's been fantastic the whole time round. There's been ups as well as lows. And I can sure you can imagine with any sort of journey. Looking at those three different, where you sit with regards to that, the thing is though, what we're talking about tonight is applicable to all of them. And they're things to consider when you're looking at starting up your own permaculture business. Right. And like anything with permaculture, it starts with ethics. It's the absolute foundation of what we do. So we're looking at earth care, people care, and fair share. And that's not just looking at the decisions we make or with regards to the landscape we design. It's also with regards to the businesses that we're setting up as well. So the enterprises, whether it be an NGO or a social enterprise or a registered business, that's what I've got. I've got a registered business. It all starts with ethics. And when you're looking at it, with earth care, starting with earth care. So thinking about how does your business regenerate or protect ecosystems? So we're looking at it from a decision-making matrix perspective where you're looking at your business going, moving forward, and it's not just through design or just through clients. What decisions are you making behind the scenes that is actually going to help regenerate or protect ecosystems? Part of the things that I do with regards to earth care is because I do use a vehicle to travel around. I probably do about 1,000 kilometres a week, sometimes more, as I'm seeing a number of clients in and around South Queensland region. As I said, I'm a full-time permaculture educator and designer, and so I work with a lot of clients. And so there's a carbon footprint with that. So as part of the earth care that I chose when I was looking at it is I actually I work out how many kilometres I've done. I know exactly what my carbon footprint with regards to the vehicle and the fuel that I've used. And then I go plant a number of trees every week that will actually help offset that. Okay, so that was part of the decisions I made. Also, when you're looking about when you're purchasing something or acquiring it, what's the ethics behind that? So looking at the earth care. Now, people care. So we're looking at how does your work improve lives? And it's not just yours, but also your others. And also family members as well. So remember, they're an integral part of our system. So what are we doing to improve our life and theirs as well through the business as that medium? And the last one being on this as far as fair share is concerned is, are you sharing knowledge, access or surplus in meaningful ways? So how are you sharing what you have with that? And I'm not necessarily saying it has to be for free, but what I'm saying is, how are you sharing that to the larger community, what you are learning or what you're researching or what you're providing to that? I mean, part of that fair share for me is I do roughly about 50, last year was roughly about 50 workshops a year for free to the community at various community gardens, spaces, private residences, whatever else it may be. Last year was 64, absolutely too much. I'm never doing that again. I can tell you that now on top of everything else. That was hitting burnout. But of course, that was the feedback loop I needed to learn for myself as well. So thinking about fair share, how are you actually sharing the knowledge and that reciprocity with the larger community as well? So examples could be earth care. You could be starting a nursery to promote native local species. All right, something very simple with regards to that. People care could be workshops to teach food growing skills in vulnerable communities. Okay, fair
Mm.
share could be offering scholarships, pay what you can spots while, or keeping prices as low as you possibly can, so it's available to everyone in particular areas. So, again, it's going to be individual for all of you. There is no one size fits all. But when it starts, when you're looking at it from business, is as everything in permaculture, we bring in ethics. Ethics is hugely important, and that's the foundation before we move on in other aspects of our business. Now, a big thing with regards to it is the idea of right livelihood or right to livelihood as a permaculture principle. Bill does talk about it in chapter 13 of the designer's manual that, with regards to, where you're investing your money or where are people investing their money. I mean, the argument has been come up more than once where people are investing their money in the likes of supermarkets or other things as well, yet they're turning around and demanding or asking that, permaculture be given for free, yet they're investing in a different system. So it's sort of what is it, what is the ethics, what is the morality in behind that? But for us as permaculture designers and who want to make a career out of this and want to be able to constantly add and research and dive more into that for our communities, this is a really important question. So understanding that a right livelihood is about making your living in a way that causes no harm and ideally brings benefit to yourself, your family, and your community, self, kin, and community, much like with regards to the principles of people care. In permaculture context, it means designing your work life just like you design your garden. Sustainability, diversity, and interconnection. Now, when I'm talking sustainability, it's not just as far as earth care is concerned. One of the big things we need to consider, and we'll be touching on this through this presentation, is the sustainability for yourself. Burnout is a real thing, especially when it's your passion. Okay. And so setting up processes in place so that we can actually consider that so we don't burn out because, realistically, you are the product, you are the business. And if you burn out, then the business is over. All right. So really considering that and understanding that you do have a right to livelihood with regards to this. Now, regenerative work does deserve value. Okay. We often undervalue purpose driven work, and we do because it's purpose driven, it's our passion. We tend to do it because we love it. But the reality is, with regenerative livelihoods, must be viable if we want them to last. One of the biggest lessons I learned early on when I started this is I was giving consults for free. I thought, give it free to the world, try and do as much as I can. But the problem was I was giving a lot of advice and I was doing a lot of designs and I was getting a lot of experience. But when I went back to visit those sites later on to see what they'd done, and absolutely nothing had happened. It was just a pretty picture that was on their wall, and it's like, hang on, I put all this time and effort for free, hoping that they would actually do something with it, and ultimately
Mm.
did. The reason they did it is because they didn't value it. All right, so that's when I started charging. I'm like, well, okay, how can I get people to start thinking there's a level of value in this? So I did actually start charging, and it was about charging what I thought I was worth. Now I undercharged at the time. I've since learnt my value, okay, with regards to that. But you cannot pour from an empty cup. And it's not necessarily just because of pure monetary value, but what is that reciprocity? What is that, value proposition that comes within that? Because your work or the work that you do is of value. Okay. So people won't take your work seriously if you don't value it. Okay? Undercharging or working for free can create long-term harm if you do it for long enough or too long. Burnout, resentment, failure to meet your own needs, because you're constantly giving and giving and giving. Like I said, you can't pour from that empty cup. Valuing your work models to others that regeneration is worth investing in. So, one of the things I've learned over the years is doing this, and as I've started to charge and as I started to look at what my value was and what I actually offered, what was that value proposition to the clients and or to the community that I was doing, and then started charging accordingly, it's interesting that I started to get more and more word of mouth. So the business actually started to grow because I valued my own work more. Where I was giving it for free or really, really cheap is what I now understand. I was constantly chasing and I was looking for more and more, and it just wasn't happening. Yet the moment I started to value my own work, then other people started to value it as well, which is actually, it was a very interesting lesson. And, something that I hope you can take away from this as well, that you need to value your regenerative work in this space because your time, your effort, your energy, your sweat does have value. Now, it doesn't mean you can't trade it for something else other than money. I mean, it could be for something else other than money. It doesn't have to be money, but it's understanding that value that's involved. So, really keeping that in mind. Ethical business can also equal mutual benefit. So some people hear ethical, or in some instances, just the word permaculture, and assume it means unpaid. Oh, it's permaculture, it's okay, it's just for free. All right. But ethical doesn't mean free. It means just, reciprocal, and beneficial to all parties. And that includes yourself. People care, or even fair share. It's not just sharing to other people, it's also what comes back to you at the same time. So there's that fair share ethic. But giving this framing, a regenerative economy, everyone's needs are met fairly, and that's everyone's needs. Okay, it's not wants, but needs. So it's not just what you're giving your client or your students or the participants or something else. It's also what comes back to you in that reciprocity, in that space. You offer real value, and in return, you receive energy back in the form of income, community, sport, or trade. Okay, so this where you give value. So understanding what you're giving in the first place, whether it be a design or a workshop or something else that you might, or even if you're just going into creating your own sort of permaculture nursery, or you're looking at creating a little bit of a market garden to help feed your community. What is that value that you're giving? And the business is a design system. Okay. So much like we would put as much effort into doing a land design for a client, when we're designing a business, we put as much effort into that and using a design process to do that as well. So understanding that the business is a design system as well. Okay. So we're looking at making it as closed loop as we can, much like we do with a lot of, and meeting the client's needs while also enhancing ecosystem health at the same time. It's exactly the same. We're just looking at it a slightly different way. All right. So business models for regenerative work. There's lots of different models out there. Okay, so the most common one that people use is freelance or consultant model work, whether they're either, just doing it for themselves or maybe they might be employed by the business. I've employed people from time to time to come in and help me when the workload gets a bit too much. But this is one of the most accessible ways to begin. You offer your time, skill, and knowledge directly to clients for a design, whether it be social, environmental, or otherwise. So you could be a permaculture designer working with homeowners or community groups. Could be a garden consultant offering site analysis, layouts, and planting plans. Implementation specialist helping to install wicking beds, food, forest, and animal systems. There's lots of different levels within this. Okay, and it's about understanding what your limitations are as well. Now, I do part of this, so this is also part of the model that I use. I have a multi-strata model that I use for my own business at Save a Soul Permaculture, and consultancy is one of the chunks within that. Now, I do a lot of design work and I do a lot of plans with clients. I do some implementation. I used to do a lot more. I don't now. I've actually outsourced a lot of it. I've met a lot of amazing people in the space who are really good at what they do. And rather than sit there and me try and do it all, because quite literally you can't do it all. So what I've done is I've made relationships with these people. And so if they're looking for particular garden beds to be done, I get the, I give them someone's name. Or if they're looking for more of a landscape design to come in to marry with the design that I've done, then I give them another person's name to do that. Because what it does is spread the work around. It actually helps generate a bit more of a community rather than feeling that you try and do it all yourself. There's actually not a lot of money in design. It's really in the implementation where a lot of it's at, if you're looking at that. But also understanding what your limitations are, what resources you have available, but also understanding the legalities behind it as well. It's actually getting tighter and tighter with regards to, here in Queensland, I'm not sure how it is in other states, but it's getting tighter with regards to the legislative side of things that you need to have sort of certain landscape certificates and white cards. And, in some instances, they're even talking about yellow cards for NDIS as well, depending on the client that you're working with. You might have to have a blue card. You might have. Things are slowly escalating. So if you have community around you that has a certain skill set, then rather than you feel you've got to do it all, play to your strength. What is your strength and play to it, and then get people to help to support you in other areas. That model has worked for me very, very well. Like I said, I still do implementation from time to time. I used to do a lot more, but not so much now. But it's about building that community, and that's sort of the base model that you're looking at. So a freelance consultancy model. Now, the pros from that, it's a relatively low overhead to start. You don't need an office, you can do it from home. Okay. A lot of the tools that you can use, I mean, if you want to work out contours, an A-frame works perfectly well. You can buy a tape, you can get a tape measure to start taking some measurements. There are a lot of free resources online with regards to mapping now. Absolutely amazing resources online that you can look up. Every state is different. And so having a look at that to get contours, to get environmental overlays, to get all that data. And even when you're looking at rainfall and temperature and stuff, there's an amazing amount of information out there. And it's all free and easy accessible. Looking at this particular model is flexible and personal as well. So you're dealing one-on-one with the client. You're building a relationship, which is actually really cool. Having those conversations. And over time, because my most popular consultant's working with clients for over 3 years, and you actually develop quite a good relationship with the clients over time, for the most part. Sometimes you don't. For the most part, and that actually really dives a lot deeper into that sort of design. And being flexible as well means that if you can only do it as a hobby because you've got a full-time job somewhere else, that gives you time to do that. If you're looking at doing it as if you're part of retirement and you're sort of looking at giving back to the community, or as part of a trade or a barter sort of system, you can do that. But if you're looking at it as far as consult work as well, or career, then having that flexibility means you can work around other projects as well. Generally speaking, I typically have about 20 to 25 projects on the go all at once. They're all different. They're all at different stages. It's really cool because you're not stuck on one thing. Anyway, that's the way I operate. That's the way I like it, and it actually helps build deep client relationships as well, because you're getting deeper over time. It's not just an initial conversation, then hand over a design or whatever else, and then you're done. Okay, you're working with people. You're building relationships. Considerations for it as well as the time for money model. Okay, scalability can be limited. So, how much time are you going to give each project? Each of the different design consultations, and I've got several different design consultations that I have a monetary value, but also an amount of hours that I give that. And I'm very clear with that with clients as well. So that way there's a lot of transparency within that. Transparency and also being clear in the communication is very important to me. So they understand what they're getting, but also there are limits to it, because it does get to a point where the cost ratio analysis for the client gets so big that it's actually not worth it for them. So even though there's value in it, they might go, listen, that's beyond my budget. So you've got to consider that as well. It requires good communication and business skills. You need to be able to talk to people. You need to be able to read people, sit down, understand what they're after, and also diving into some of that nuance. There's been more than one time where I've been talking to clients and they're talking, oh, yeah, I want a food forest. And then we have long conversations. And then by the end of it, it's like, I'm getting a vibe here. I don't think you do. And then you propose something else. And I said, actually, yeah, that's exactly what I'm after. So while it's about the language and the terminology, but also getting into the nuance of that as well. It requires good time management. You need to be on time. Actually, I had someone say to me years ago, 7 minutes early is 10 minutes late. All right, because getting there early so you can actually be prepared to get there on site and have a look at these things, but also when you're looking at deadlines for what you're giving as well, and it's very important to keep and maintain those. Now, the last bit as well is insurance. Okay, I can't highlight it enough. I know there's some say you don't, but I had someone say to me many, many years ago, is it worth losing your house? Okay, because you're responsible for what you advise with what you do. So therefore, insurance comes into play. So having your insurances in place, and also there's the blue and white cards, which blue card working with children here in Queensland. White card is with regards to, while it's more originally it was more the mining industry. Actually, landscaping and gardening is now coming under the white card here in Queensland as well. Other states are I know some states are other states are similar, not all though, and potentially maybe the yellow card for NDIS as well. So something depending on where you want to go with your niche, things you need to consider. Okay, for that. The education model. So if you love sharing knowledge, education-based business can be impactful. Okay, so you could be wanting to teach a PDC or an introduction to permaculture or other little workshops, themes, where it be compostings or soil or, whatever it may be, any of the particular permaculture subjects. Okay, you could deliver things online like this we're doing tonight with a webinar. Okay, there could be mentoring programs, which is sort of what my 3-year adaptive design is with clients. It's more of a mentor design and mentoring program. Some organizations even have memberships where there's like a CSA model where they sort of pay us, well, CSP it would be, they're not a CSA, isn't it? But anyway, they sort of subscribe a little bit, and therefore there's a constant ongoing advice, design, whatever it may be. So they're constantly getting things out of that. There's also school gardens and community education contracts as well, that you can work through. So I've worked with schools. I'm also working with the University of Queensland as well. There's lots of stuff that can happen in that, but it's understanding which particular model you're sort of looking for. I do the consultation, and I also do the education model as well. It's a very big part of what I do. The pros: it can be scalable and scalable income potential. It has the potential to scale up. All right. But also, it is a very competitive space. There is a lot of people in there who are just, trying to make a living, especially during this cost of living crisis as well. And so they're offering workshops. And so there's more and more people doing it. There's only a certain market for it as well. I know it sounds very non-permaculture language, but this is just the reality of it. And so, it has the potential to get quite large on the online space. A lot more people have been getting into the online space the last couple of years. So it's really about thinking, what is your niche with regards to that. I do stuff online, but most of the stuff I like to do is in person and hands-on, because I can relate to people. I love having those conversations. I love the activities, where you just miss out on that online. So yeah, you can build leadership and a reputation within the space as well, as far as education, because people coming to you looking for knowledge, or even just asking you questions so they can use you as a sounding board so things can bounce off, and a deep impact on community knowledge as well. So, an example of that is I'm currently working not with, but for a local community centre, and sort of heading to set up their space and installing gardens and help clean up their forest garden. There's a whole heap of other stuff as well. But that's already having a deep impact on the community. A lot of people have come in and sort of went, wow, look at this, what's this all about? And asking lots of questions. And that's getting a lot of engagement, which has actually been awesome, and including the neighbours, who are sort of leaning over the fence and asking questions. And then some of the neighbours are even offering trees to come into the space as well, that can be planted, that can actually add to the diversity, which is actually awesome. Considerations you need to do: it does require a lot of preparation, and I can't stress that enough. Lots of preparation with regards to a workshop. It's not just, hey, let's run a workshop and then you start doing it. There's a lot of prep work beforehand. You've got to market it, and also you've got to look at your insurance as well. Whether professional, but also public liability. If you are delivering a workshop in a like a community space somewhere, you are typically required to have at least public liability, and you will need to have your certificate of writ to be able to show the people who you're hiring the space from that you are insured, for you able to get that. If you don't have it, the space is not going to happen. You may need to develop digital skills for online education. Okay, my kids still laugh at me and my digital skills. If it wasn't for them, I would not be where I am. They are my mentors in this space. I am their mentee, and also, it's not actually, education is not hugely profitable. A lot of people seem to, there is this idea where, oh, you're running a PDC. I'm about to start a PDC on Sunday, out here in Ipswich. But you're running a PDC, so therefore, and it's like, well, actually, when you take the costs of the site, the insurances, all the resources, and then you're looking at getting to the guest teachers coming in, and all those other expenses that come in, by the end of it, there's actually not a lot left, and that's got to last you. Now, I only run one PDC every 12 months, sometimes online, sometimes in person, but it's one every 12 months. So you're looking at how much money that's made, and that's got to last you that period of time. It's the same with any other workshop. How many times do you run it per year? And that income needs to last you up until the next time. So it's something to consider. So workshops, while deeply impactful, and not particularly profitable as far as that, it's more of the giving back, and it's understanding what your expenses are, which leads to how much you charge. There's the product-based models. So this includes everything you can grow, make, or craft using regenerative practices. So you could be selling plants, you could be propagating rare edibles, you could value-add products where herbal teas, preserves, ferments, infused oils. Many years ago, I used to do jams. I called it jamming with friends, where I'd be able to take the produce that I produced, value add it, and sold it. So that was just something I had a little bit of a value add on that too. You could craft goods from materials, beeswax. You could beeswax wraps, natural skincare, bamboo products. You could even do a market garden. I tried that, failed, and that wasn't so much because of the gardening. That was because of where the garden was at, and I could not compete with the industrial farming that was around me. Microgreens, egg production, or even a small scale CSA, depending on where you're at. So there are product-based models as well. It's not necessarily all about consulting or education. There are product-based models. The pros of that: you can build a strong brand and a loyal customer base. It's tangible and satisfying. It's good for people who prefer doing over talking. So you really just want to get in there and get things done. Where the education side, there's a lot of planning and a lot of talking, and same with the consult work too, requires a lot of people skills. The considerations: time, infrastructure, and supply management. So, how much time do you have? The infrastructure to the style of gardening or nursery or whatever your enterprise might be, or if you're doing preserves, it might be a commercial kitchen, depending on where it's at. So, food safety is a big one. Packaging may be needed. Also insurances, perhaps employees, with everything and everything that goes in with that. So that's work cover. There's superannuation. There's a lot of other stuff that happens as well. Now, there's a thing that with regards to interns. Now, interns in Australia must be paid. Okay, that's just a legal requirement. So I used to run an internship program, and then the laws changed, and I could not afford to pay the interns who was coming in to learn from me. So I, in turn, just I had to unfortunately stop the program. That's just the reality of it. So because I could not afford to employ them to for them to learn. But that's, again, it's a consideration you need to think about. Now, there are hybrid models, so stacked income. This is one of the things that I look at for me. So most successful permaculture businesses blend multiple income streams. It's about diversity of income. So you'd look at use and value diversity as one of the design principles from David Holmgren. It's the same with regards to the business. So you're bringing lots of things coming into that. All right. So what we're looking at is, so a teacher who you might be educating, and you're selling some of the plants that you've done, and also promoting a consultancy in with regards to that as well. You could have a small farm that hosts workshops. It could sell produce and runs a CSA at the same time, so you're getting multiple streams within that. There could be a nursery that also provides design and installation services, and perhaps tours of the nursery. So you've got multiple little streams coming in that's actually going to help support you and your family. Pros with regards to that is diversity and resiliency. When one is not doing well, you've got other things that can actually help support you. Rather, if you're only solely reliant on the one thing and it fails, then it all fails. It keeps the work dynamic and adaptive. All right, you're not just doing the same thing again and again and again. You are constantly changing with what you're doing. So it's also, I find, it keeps my mind moving, because I'm constantly doing different things, right? And allows income during different seasons. So different things actually do better at different seasons. Considerations: requires really good time management. Okay, because you've got multiple things going on, you need to be all over them, and so you need to be able to strategically focus at different times. You must be able to track multiple business activities carefully, and of course, insurance is another big one as well. And also, there's cooperative and community models that can come into that. So you don't have to do it all alone. You can have a cooperative model which shares risk, resources, and rewards. Now, I've adopted some of this with some of the people I work with. So therefore, if someone wants something with regards to a particular implementation model, I will go to over there, or I'll go see Paul for the beds, or I'll go a sort of we've got this working relationship which works really, really well. Example could be, worker-owned permaculture design collectives, and I've seen a few of those. Tool and seed libraries with membership structures. Community-supported permaculture. That's what I was saying before. CSP, like a CSA model for education and services. There could be urban food hubs or shared market stalls. Just some examples. Pros for that: it builds community and connection. So you're working with a number of individuals. You're sharing the responsibilities as well. And scales impact beyond individual capacity. It's always good to have someone else to bounce off as well. And if a project is not, if it's beyond, and you got to be honest with yourself with regards to this. It's like, no, listen, this is too big for me. Then you can look to the collective to see if other people can come in and help you and fill those gaps of knowledge that you don't have. The considerations: you need to have clear arrangements and communication, absolutely crystal clear. Fuzzy beginnings means fiery endings. Okay, it's fine to sit around the table and think, yeah, this is going to work, but unless you have those clear agreements, what's going to happen when there's a disagreement? What's going to happen, with regards to sort of the distribution of the value that comes in from that design or that work or that whatever? You need to have clear communications and agreements, otherwise it's all going to fall apart. Okay, and often slower to build, but they can be more stable in the long term, which is actually really cool when you're starting to work with a number of individuals. Now, finding your own niche and communicating your value. Now, I think we're all familiar with this particular image of the gay. Sorry, bad pronunciation on my behalf. But sort of, finding out what your niche is, and realistically, you can't do it all. I mean, a lot of people try to. They try to be, all things to all people, just because it's our passion, and we want to try and help people as much as we possibly can. But understanding what your niche is and what really is your passion and how can you tie into that. So, your niche is where skills meet needs plus joy. All right, that's the niche. A niche isn't a limitation; it's a focus. So where are you going to be spending your time focusing? It could be on a suburban permaculture. All right, you might focus solely on suburban permaculture, or you might focus on schools, or you might focus on nursery, or you might focus on, it's what's feeding your soul and what you're really good at. Like I said, you're playing to your strengths, not so much to your weaknesses. The intersection of unique abilities, the needs of your community or market, and the kind of work that brings you joy creates a sustainable, rewarding space to grow your business. It's about feeding your soul. As a friend of mine says all the time, Michael, it's about feeding your soul because it's not just about the larger, it's also about the inner landscape as well. And if you're not feeding that, then there's not the joy that's going to allow you to move on. So finding the niche rather than feel that you've got to try and do it all. Okay. Now, there you go. Avoid trying to be everything to everyone. Okay, it's tempting to offer everything to everyone, especially in the early stages, but it leads to burnout, confusion, and poor messaging. So, really finding clarity in where you want to go and what you want to offer. Permaculture design teaches us to observe, slow down, and make intentional decisions. Okay, so why not apply the same ideas in what we want to do with our business? So by doing so, we're going to get more focus and we're going to be able to do a better job at what we're doing rather than trying to juggle so many balls in the air that we're going to start dropping things. You can always grow and diversify later, but a strong niche as an anchor to your enterprise is always important. Now, I was umming and ahhing about putting this one in, but I decided to in the long run because it's actually really important and it's very, very common. And it's about resilience, burnout, and mental health. Okay. Working in this space can be challenging. And so acknowledging the emotional and psychological challenges of being in a regenerative values-based work is important. Okay, because if we don't do so, we're not going to have that well-being for thriving for the long term for ourselves and our family and our community. Again, you can't pour from an empty cup. But burnout is extremely common in permaculture as a business because those of us that come into it, we're doing it because we're passionate about it. And so we're constantly giving and giving. So we tend to work for long hours for little pay. We feel personally responsible for community or environmental issues, even though we can't control anything about it. There's nothing we can do about it. We do the best we can with what we have, but because we take on that burden, it's another stress that we take onto ourselves. And we tend to say yes quite a lot because that whole idea of FOMO, fear of missing out, or letting others down because we're trying to get the message out there to try and help as many people as we possibly can, but understanding that we can't do it without helping ourselves. And this can lead to compassion fatigue, creative stagnation, or even full burnout. Okay. A worst case scenario, yeah, we don't want to go down there, but it's happened a few times within the industry itself. And just keeping an eye out on your mental health and that idea of burnout is really, really important. So, you can't give from an empty cup. Build in time in your business for recovery. All right. So there's a time to close the office door at the end of the day. Okay. Regenerative systems include rest and renewal. Your business should do as well. Design your schedule with natural rhythms. Time off after events and launches. So after really big things, or you're about to start a really big thing, or you've just finished a really big thing, schedule some time to decompact rather than just keep going and going and going. Otherwise we will burn out and there's bigger consequences. Downtime during the heat of summer or a wet season. So here where I'm sitting, summer can get really, really hot and really suck the energy out of you. So I change my work rhythm over the summer compared to winter based on that because I understand my own rhythms. What is your rhythm? And then build your business around that as well. Weekly breaks where you don't engage in output tasks. Okay, so it's about, and it's not all about permaculture. Take the time to have a break from it as well. Get creative in other spaces, because otherwise you're just constantly in it 24/7. And, again, that can lead to fatigue and other things as well. Um, think of this as yielding, an essential part of a system function. And I've got under here and highlighted, this is not a luxury. This is a design principle. You have to bring this in. I didn't for a very, very long time, and I'm now physically paying the consequences for that. Lots of reasons, not getting into it, but I can really trace it down to, one of the things I can trace it down to is I just kept going and going and going. And the whole attitude of, nah, she'll be right. It's all right. I'll just keep going. All right. Eventually, you've got to pay the piper at some point. So really, if you build this in at the start, then in the long run, you're not going to have some problems, whether it be through your business, burnout, or other things. Set boundaries. All right. As educators and designers and consultants, we're actually typically really bad at setting boundaries. Again, it's that whole idea of fear of missing out or fear of disappointing people. So consider time, money, and energy as your three things that you're looking at as far as those boundaries as a business. Okay, without clear boundaries, your business will consume your life. Boundaries might look like no emails or client calls after 6 p.m. That's it. Once done is done. When I have a scheduled weekend off and a text or something comes through, yes, I will look at it. But if it's not important, I will not answer it until Monday morning. There are times when I'll be out somewhere and someone will start asking me questions with regards to permaculture while I'm out at a social event. And I'll go, that's great, awesome. Listen, give me a call Monday morning. I'm not working now. I'm here as a social. I'm not here as a permaculture designer or educator. Setting those clear boundaries. At first, it was hard, and some people sort of, screwed up their nose at it a little bit. Now people understand that, there are times there where I'm off, and doing other things. Okay, charging what your time is worth, not just what people can afford. So, what is your time? What is your time worth? And we'll be talking about some things to consider to get to that point, because you've got to meet those needs as well. And saying no to projects outside your niche. It took me a long time to learn that one, but the word no is very important, very, very important. And there are projects that pop up that could be absolutely amazing, but it's outside my niche, or it's beyond my scope, or it's beyond my capacity for whatever reason. I say, listen, I'd love to, but unfortunately, I can't take it at this time. I could suggest some other designers, or there's lots of other conversations you can have with that as well. So that can also help build community. Respecting your own time teaches others to do the same. So a boundary is not about the way other people treat you, it's about the way you treat yourself. And by you doing that, then other people will start to treat you appropriately as well. Again, it's permaculture as a consultant, an educator and designer. We're notorious for ignoring this, as a profession. And it's something that we do need to consider for the long-term sustainability of what we're doing. Seek support. So, peers, mentors, and mental health services. Okay, so this first one I put up there, isolation is a risk. Okay, especially as a solo business owner or community workers. Now, I've put that in there because there was a late last year, my mum, she wanted to find out what I was doing. So she, hey, can I come out with you for the day? So she came out with me for the day, and we did the day. And, it was quite a big day, number of consults, number of clients, got a lot done. And anyway, on the drive on the way back, I said, well, what did you think, Mum? And she goes, listen, this would be very lonely, wouldn't it? I went, well, what do you mean? I just look at all the stuff we've done. She said, no, no. Look at the time in between where you're just alone and you're spending your time thinking and you're designing and you're doing this. And isolation is a very big risk. And I actually hadn't considered it at that point. Though after she mentioned it, it was like a light bulb went on. And it's like, actually, yes, it's something that is something we need to consider. So having peers and mentors to help bounce ideas off and create that little bit of a community so you don't get isolated, because it really is. Like I said, I do about 1,000 kilometers a week. That's me in the car on my own for the most part. And then there's the design work afterwards, and that's all me. So helping that support network to help you with regards to that. And that's where it's build your own support guild. Trusted peers who understand your field. I had, a number of mentors who I work with. I've got some good trusted peers and friends who I chat to as well, and past students as well who've become very good friends as well. And the last one here, mental health professionals who can help you navigate stress, anxiety, and trauma. I actually work quite often with a mental health professional, a psychologist, and it's not so much It's not that I have issues, but I think we all have issues. But it's about keeping my mind sharp. And so I see them regularly, discuss ideas, discuss what I'm doing, the decisions that I've made, and the relationship we have is they challenge me on those decisions and things, so we can actually draw out what the biases are, what the context is. But I'm actually working with a professional mental health professional, so that we can actually make sure that everything is still sharp and working the way it should be. 2018 and 2019 for me, I don't know if anyone else remembers, like during the last drought and all those fires, I was watching whole ecosystems collapse. That was depressing as all hell. And wasn't a thing I could do about it, but you're out there working in the landscapes and you're doing what you can, but there's a lot you couldn't do. That took a toll. And, when you're looking at these larger projects, having these systems in place to start with means that in the long term, it's going to be, again, sustainable on a mental health side for you. So seeking support and having that where it's available. And like I said, I do a regular mental health check-in with regards. So I consider it like tuning a car. You regularly we're supposed to get our cars regularly tuned and maintained to run a peak performance. It's exactly the same. Okay. And so check in regularly, not just when you're in a crisis. Okay. So you can get lots of tools and strategies from friends, from peers, and other professionals in that space, and mentors as well. Self-care is not an indulgence, it's sustainability. Okay, you are your business's most important asset. If you collapse, so does it. Um, and that's the truth with regards to what we do as a permaculture community, or permaculture educators, designers, consultants, when you're looking at it from a business model. Unless you're fortunate enough to be employed by someone else, and then it sort of becomes a different relationship. So true self-care is not about bubble baths and yoga. It's also about having a clear pricing structure. Again, it sets a boundary. Taking breaks before you're exhausted. And that ties into the next one, where listen to your body. If your body's telling you something, listen to it. Because if you don't, there can be long-term consequences. Seeking joy, not just efficiency. It's easy to dive into the whole, let's get it in and get it done. No, it's also about seeking joy for ourselves, because, we're feeding that soul that I talked about before. Where at times, like I said, there can be really highs in this space and really big lows. But having that as a constant helps make it sustainable for ourselves in the long run. Creating a space for relationships and creativity outside of work. Do something else. It is the permaculture is an absolute, and the regenerative space is an absolute passion of mine. But having time out to do other things is equally important, with friends and family and stuff as well. So carving time out, because it's easy to get lost. And resilience isn't about pushing through. It's about designing systems that restore you. So it's not about she'll be right, I'll just keep going. It's no. We want it to be able to support ourselves and restore ourselves, to be restorative. Healing for ourselves as well, for the planet, as well for the clients and other things as well. Now I threw this one in here. Regardless of what you do, you will always be the villain in someone else's story. When you do step into the space as a business in permaculture, you will get people who will rail against you for whatever reason. You will have, I've had an instance where there was a participant, a student, who didn't show up to half the classes that were for one of the big courses that I was running. There ended up being some consequences, and in turn, I'm the bad guy. But they're the ones that didn't show up. It's okay. When you're stepping in space, you've got to have broad shoulders. Other professionals as well. There could be other issues within that. But also, in an instance, there was I've let clients go in the past because of incidents that happened. It's like, listen, that is not within my ethical structure. That is not the agreed scope that we've had. Thank you very much. I hope you've got a lot from the experience, and you move on. And now, some people's like, no, I'm going to persevere and get through. But understand that you've also got to look after yourself as well. And, you could be pouring into that void, and it just keeps taking and taking and taking, and you've got to set that boundary. But understanding, when you do step into the space, you will be the villain in someone else's story regardless. Okay, so because you're sticking your head up, you're actually stepping into the space, and someone will at some point do that. It hasn't happened often for me. It has happened a couple of times, but it is something you need to consider as well, because when it happens, it can be a bit of a shock sometimes. All right. Money matters. So, tax, super, and being professional. I know it's, permaculture is, let's build a new system, but also we've got to work within the system we currently have. So things to consider to stay sustainable, legal and confident. If we bottle our I's and cross our T's, it's amazing how smooth things could get. It isn't about selling out. It's about clear, valued, and future focused. All right, because if you don't pay your tax, well, you know what? You can get into a lot of trouble. If you don't, don't if you don't keep up to date with your superannuation, you know what? In the long run, it's going to bite you. You're not going to have those resources to fall back on in the future, and especially when you take this as a full-time career. It's easy to, especially as a sole trader, it's easy to go, oh, that's all right. I won't pay my super this month. You know what? In the long run, you're hurting yourself. And then you're going to have to, I've known a number of permaculturists who, when they've spent their life giving, and then they got to the end of their life and had to sell their house to raise enough money to be able to retire. I mean, it's just wrong. But we need to consider this in our long-term, future-focused business model as well, to make it sustainable for ourselves, not just our communities. So keeping good records, invoices, expenses, and clear boundaries between business and personal. What is business is business, what is personal is personal. It's easy to cross them over, but it makes it really messy when you start sorting things out at tax time. So good financial hygiene makes everything easier. Okay, whether it be tax, applying for grants, growth for business, or just understanding how your cash is flowing. Using systems like I use Xero, but there are other ones, MYOB. I'm sure there are other ones as well. But it makes it particularly easy as far as invoicing and keep tracking a lot of things is concerned. Having a separate bank account for business expenses and income, so therefore it's not attached to your own personal, so you can keep them separate. But my model is like the business. I draw a wage from the business. It doesn't pay me a dividend or anything. I draw a wage every fortnight, and so therefore I've got my personal account and I got my business account, and therefore it keeps things really clean as far as that is concerned. Keeping receipts or scanning them in is also important. So, again, when it comes to tax, it doesn't have to be complex, but it does have to be consistent. All right, because in the end of the day, you're going to have to show just cause when it comes to it. And even then, sometimes it can rule against you. I mean, there's a time when there's a significant amount of money that I'm owed by the tax department, but they're allowed to keep it. So therefore, I have to, next time you make a profit, we'll just take it off that. It's like, no, just I'd like my money, please. But either way, long story short, it doesn't always go your way. And so you've got to keep that in mind when you're budgeting for this sort of stuff as well. And superannuation, yes, even for sole traders, like I said, it's really important to do this because you don't want to get to the end where you want to retire and find you just cannot survive. Like I said, I have known permaculturists who've had to sell their properties after spending a lifetime living there, building them up, having to sell them so they could actually earn enough money to retire. So making sure you're paying into it, set a little bit aside if you can. And also there's ethical super funds. So there's Australian Ethical and Future Super and stuff as well. So, they can actually make those investments. So they're making ethical investments on your behalf. So you can get that dividend for the long run. And compound interest makes even small contributions over a long period of time very powerful. Okay, so that's that constant for that retirement in the long term. You need to register your name, ABN, and insurances. Okay, I know might be boring. You might not have thought to come here to hear about this, but this is the business of permaculture. This is what we do. Okay, even small operations benefit from the legitimacy. It helps build clients' trust. The amount of times I've walked onto sites and because I've got an ABN and because I've got my white card and because I've got my blue card and I've got my certificate of currency and I've got all this other stuff behind me as well, and that's got me through the door, which got me the job. That's actually helped my business, not hindered it. And sometimes it's a bit inconvenient getting my white card when that became a thing. Okay, it was 4 hours of my life and cost me about $140. So I had to carve that time into it to get it. But once I got it, it's well, at the minute anyway, you don't have to go back and get it again. So again, just showing that white card has been enough to get me in on sites, which has in turn got me the job. Something very similar, very simple, but it makes a big thing. So clients trust you. You can access tools like business banking, grants, and discounts. So there is a lot of grants out there that you can apply for if you have got an ABN, if you've got a business name and a business and a business plan and some insurance. There's things as well that can actually help you move forward in that space. It helps to protect yourself legally as well. Insurance, so your public liability and professional indemnity are the two big ones that you're looking at coming into it. Helps reduce risks, especially if you teach, consult, install gardens, or sell food and physical goods and stuff as well. Because as I said before, we're a solicitor. Is it worth losing your house? And if the answer is no, then what do you need to put into place so that's not going to happen? Because we do live, unfortunately, in a very litigious world. Hiring an accountant and a bookkeeper is an investment, not a luxury. Okay. My bookkeeper, I have got a bookkeeper and I have got an accountant, and they've been amazing. And it's been worth an absolute weight in gold because the amount what I can claim, I'd had no idea. And they're like, "Oh, Michael, you can claim for this and you can claim for that." They find it all right, which has made it very, helped me with my business side of things, but also has made the tax so simple. So when there's a problem, well, there isn't a problem. It goes straight through because it's all done. Otherwise, when you try and do it yourself, if you might have the skills to do it, that's great. I don't. You put the word, money's fine. You put the word tax in front of it, I've got no idea. It's like my brain dribbles out my ear. But they've been able to help me a lot, and so they help you make legitimate deductions, ensure that you're paying the right amount of taxes, keep you compliant and confident as well. Okay, they save me more money than what it cost me to have them on the books. So and they can also help me give as I said here, quarterly or annually check-ins to see how the business is going financially and where I can actually look at it and where I might be able to make savings so I can actually invest that money in other things. And part of that investment is it's not just in myself or paying rent because I currently rent, but also I do a lot of research, and sometimes some of that research actually costs. So I'm about to invest into a new research project with regards to PFAS and a few other things, and I worked out the cost of it the other day. It's probably going to cost me about $1,500 when you get all the testing and stuff in. But once that's testing done, and once I've got all the information, I'm going to release that information, and people are going to, they'll either appreciate it or not. But that's a cost. So to help advance that, then I need to spend the money, but you're not really getting that back. So you've got to try and find it in other ways. That's part of that reciprocity, but understanding that this helps with regards to that. Okay, it helps build for that long-term future. Valuing your work doesn't mean selling out. Charging fairly for your work enables you to keep doing what you're doing and do it well. Okay, undervaluing yourself trains clients to expect too much for too little, makes your work feel stressful and unworthy, undermines the broader regenerative movement as a whole, because it's not just you. There's a lot of other people working in that space as well. And if you undervalue you, then you're also undervaluing everyone else. And we're a community in this. And right to livelihood means right relationship with money too, not just avoidance, shame, and excess. So understanding, there's the saying that what was it? The money is the root of all evil. Well, that's not the saying. It's actually the love of money is the root to all evil. So it's a tool like anything, whether it be a swale, a wicking bed, whatever else. It's a tool in the toolbox. It's how we can use it to align with our ethics and design principles in our business to move forward for that long-term regenerative future. And of course, the last one of the big things, but permaculture should be free conversation. Permaculture is a gift. Absolutely. What David and Bill built with that meeting of minds on that learning edge has been absolutely incredible and has just rocked the world. But delivering it and delivering it well takes time, energy, and resources. Like I said, I'm about to start a PDC on Sunday, and while I have got some money from the selling of the tickets for that, there's also a lot of expenses behind the scenes with regards to textbooks and all sorts of other stuff and learning resources and activities. And, there's a lot of stuff behind the scenes. Who's paying for that? Because if you don't charge or you don't charge properly, then it's going to end up on your shoulders, which is going to cause financial stress. And I mean, you might be financially enough that where you can do that without having to worry about it. That's great. That's awesome. But, many aren't. The idea of permaculture should be free often comes from a good place of, a place of good intentions, a desire for open access, very important, and a anti-capitalist approach roots to the movement. Again, as absolutely, capitalism has done lots of harm, but also, thinking about that and the tradition of knowledge sharing in the community, they're really big and important subjects. Being free to access is not the same as being free to create or deliver. And that's what I'm saying about there is a cost behind some of these things. Like I've said, I'm about to start doing some research into some stuff with regards to PFAS. It's going to cost me to do it because I want to get the testing, I want to do it right. And that way I actually have the data to do it. That's going to cost. So Can't just wear it off my own bat. And that's coming from the consultation work, the education work, all these other things that I offer. And part of that, I have a research fund, and that fund, well, a portion of that goes into research, which in turn is used into that. So, it's not free, but the money's got to come to pay for it from somewhere. And so that's how I've structured it. The community work that I do, again, is supported by the paid work that I do. So, it's not free, but free for some is probably a better way of doing it or saying it. And permaculture without financial viability burns out change makers. Okay. If you can't afford it, there's a lot of stress in that. No one gets paid. Only independently wealthy can afford to teach. People doing the work for regenerative landscapes and communities deserve the means to feed themselves. And it could be just something as simple as putting the roof overhead. If I wasn't paid for what I do, I would not be able to rent this house. That's it. Burnout, financial stress, and time poverty are real issues, and they are. I mean, I don't know many in who are doing this in the community who don't feel this at some point, or it's fairly regular for one reason or another. Okay, we're trying to do the best we can with what we have. And again, this is not to scare you off. This is just so you understand what's involved. And so, looking at this and how can you set up your own business and system so you may not have these issues. Sustainability includes the social and economic layers, not just the ecological one. All right, what is the weakest link if you want to draw in from some of the holistic management stuff? Okay, now fair share includes reciprocity and right relationships. So fair share isn't just giving, it is also receiving in balance. To be sliding scale fees, work exchange options, sponsored or supported places, free public talks alongside paid offerings, which is what I tend to do a lot of. Everyone deserves access, but that does not mean every offering is free. You can give and earn generosity and professional, and they're not opposites. Okay. It's not about commercialization. It's about becoming sustainable. Like a farm, like any sort of enterprise, there needs to be financial viability as well as ecological and social sustainability in that as well. Okay. We are no different. So when you're charging for you model valuing regenerative work when you charge. Okay. When you value what you do, you create space to offer help to others who genuinely need it. Like I said, my paid work actually helps me do some of the volunteer work and volunteer design work too for sort of organizations and some of the homeless and all that sort of stuff as well. That actually helps pay for that. I wouldn't be able to do that if it wasn't for that. That's that reciprocity again. You'd stay in the game long enough to make a real impact. So you're able to be able to do it and maintain it because you're sustained. Okay. The goal is not profit at all costs. It is to create a right livelihood that sustains you and your work. Okay. I'll never make a lot of money out of this. The goal was never to make a lot of money out of this. The goal was to be able to create a living out of this. And that's a very big difference. So in a nutshell, getting down to the end of it, okay, treat it like a business, even if it's a passion project. We can get caught up in the romanticism of it. And I've had people come into the business and to save a soil, with rose-colored glasses, and within 6 to 8 months, and later they're like, I won't say drudgery, but there is a certain pattern to these things, and it's not as rosy as they once thought because of the travel, because of the amount of clients that we're working with, because of the workshops, because of it is a constant thing. You are working when others aren't, generally speaking, and you're doing the work that you need to do to make the other projects happen while they are at work. So, I generally work 6 days a week. I used to work 7 days a week, 12 to 14-hour days, but then I started taking days off a couple of years ago, at least one. Sometimes I get two now, which is actually really good too. Those are really good days, or good weekends, I should say. But understanding that you need to treat it like a business. Okay. So, what is that ratio analysis? And it's still tying into ethics. It's still tying into design principles, but we've also got to make it real. If we get too caught up in the romanticism, it's going to fail. Start with a personal budget. All right. Now, the reason I say start with a personal budget, if you're going to be drawing an income from your business, you need to know how much to make. For my own business, if I save a soil, I draw a wage every fortnight. To do that, I needed to work out what my personal budget was, and therefore that's what the business needs to pay me, not what it needs to earn. The business itself has its own expenses, okay, whether it be insurances and resources and subscriptions and all sorts of other stuff as well. I needed to understand how much I needed to earn to survive, all right, to meet my needs, to meet my family's needs, and then from there expand out from it. So start with a personal budget, and then get some experience. So, you might have just done a PDC and you're really excited, or you've done it a while ago and you want to start playing with the space. Even if you're just offering to friends and family, get a little bit of design work. Get if you want to do design, or offer to help co-teach on some projects if you can, or whatever it is. Get a little bit of experience before you dive headlong in, because then you're sort of easing into it rather than jumping off the cliff. Jumping off the cliff was an incredible experience, I found, but in the long run, it wasn't the right decision. I should have taken a bit more slower approach. But that's okay. That's lessons learned, and I've learned a lot and done a lot in the last 11 years. Don't get me wrong, in the professional space anyway. And so, but gets a little bit of experience because it can go a long way. Develop a simple business plan and budget. So it's not just what your personal budget is, but also what it is for your business. So therefore, you know what to hit as far as how much it needs to bring in, how much it needs to make to be viable for you. And now it may take you a couple of years to get there. It took me a couple of years or a few years to get there, but I did. All right. Permaculture is a very niche space to begin with. And then you're creating your own niche within that niche, a hole within a hole, as it were. And so creating a simple business plan and budget means you're sort of understanding what you're getting to. Keep it simple to start with. Don't make it overly complex. KOS, keep it simple. Because if these things will naturally get bigger and more complex in time. But if you keep it simple to start with, if something goes wrong, you know exactly where it went wrong. Just like when we're designing landscapes. Whereas if you go for complexity to start with and something goes wrong, you've got no idea where it happened. All right. Potentially, when you start out, keep a side gig without burning out. Very important. So you've got a small trickle of income coming in while you are building the business. It's very common for a lot of people who are coming into this to do that, and then ultimately transition full time when they do. And the last thing to consider is look for local collaborators. So look for your peers and mentors in your community that you can, so you can build that support base. Without that, you're flying alone, and it's a very isolated place to be in. Having those mentors, having those peers, and having, not only ties into the mental health side, but also actually helps support you in your work and what you do. So that's it for the end of the presentation. So we've got closing and sort of Q&A. So I'm going to stop sharing at the minute. Cool. All right, so I'm going to open up the floor now to questions. Now, I know that was a lot of information. I've just gone over the hour, but we did start a little bit late because I was waiting for some people to come in, so we didn't do too bad. Has anyone got any questions about that presentation at all?
I don't have a question, but I just wanted to let you know that that's one of the best presentations I've ever seen, and I really appreciate your time. I thought that was absolutely fantastic.
Oh, well, thank you. It was just learned experience over the last 11 years of doing this professionally. Not just the highs, but also the lows, and what to consider to actually. So, if you do decide to go into this, you go into it open. You go with understanding the foundations rather than, yeah. A lot of those lessons were hard learned, and no one ever told me at the start when I first started that this is the stuff I needed to consider. It's just something that's happened over time. But yeah, no, good. Thank you very much. I'm glad you got a lot from it.
Michael, there was a term called microgreens,
Oh yes,
and I wondered what that was.
microgreens is sort of you having a tray and you grow in edible seeds, and you only let them grow for about a week, so they get till about that tall, and then you harvest them and then you eat them. So I do it for myself, but there are businesses out there that do that and sort of sell it to cafes and stuff as well. There can be a market for that. And it can be a relatively easy in if you've got the market. And now growing, it's the easy part. The marketing and the selling is the hard part. All right. So it could be an in for some who are interested in doing that in that space. Yeah. Thank you. Very in-depth and interesting. Thank you. No, it was all good info. Thank you very much, Sil. Yeah. Dave, you were going to say something?
Yeah, in terms of like, do you have an understanding of, as a sector, like where permaculture is going, like the trend
How do you mean trend? What are you trying to
in
refer
terms
to?
of consulting, and it's growing as a business market? Like,
Um,
or is that still at a community level? Most of that
uh,
is at a community level.
yeah, it's about really finding your niche. Now,
Yeah.
I'm fortunate enough to, I got a lot of
Sorry,
my
I'm,
work.
I'm big picture first and then on.
Yeah. I get that. I get that. Um, but finding your niche and then working within your niche. When you're looking at the
Mm,
big picture stuff, the permaculture as a whole is really quite a small community within inside the larger community of Australia, the world, whatever.
mm,
And so more and more people are getting attracted to the gardening side of it. So people are getting in for looking for garden consults if you want to look at it from that perspective. Permaculture is a lot more than that, as you know.
mm,
When you're looking at David Holmgren's flower with regards to the seven petals, one of them's about growing food and or nature and nature stewardship, but the rest of it's about realistically climate of the mind and built and tools and technology.
mm,
um, but looking at a lot of people are coming into, because gardening Australia,
mm,
amazing program. A lot of it's about growing food. A lot of people are coming into looking at from a level of, I don't like the term, but self-sufficiency, if that makes sense.
mm.
Wanting to grow and be self-sufficient and get off grid. I mean, permaculture is not about that, but a lot of people are using the skills that they're learning in permaculture to be able to do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So, on a macro level, there are some development companies and stuff that are sort of taking on what we're doing seriously. I've been fortunate enough to advise on a couple of projects with regards to that. But permaculture is still a niche thing overall.
Mm,
Um, yeah, that's sort of my take on it. In other regions might be different. I remember talking to Dan Palmer many years ago, and he was saying that you shake a tree in Melbourne and 10 permies will walk out. Doesn't matter which tree. You shake a tree and 10 permies fall out. That's how many people have done PDCs, and that's how many people are doing it.
mm,
But every region's going to be different. The
mm.
difference between the city and the country is also a very big thing as well. Different mindsets, different ideas, different personalities. Yeah, there's a lot to it. Yeah.
And the doorways into furthering yourself into this is actually your own knowledge of where you are at now and growing on that. So
Yeah,
for me, it'll
absolutely.
be the social permaculture
Yeah,
stuff of, building
it's that.
teams and
Yeah, it's finding your niche.
yeah.
You can't, as it is saying, you can't be everything to everyone.
Mm, mm,
So, and I know there's a lot of, it's like, I'll build up on, this is my weakness, I'm going to work on that. You know, Work on your strength.
mm.
Why play to your weakness when you can play to your strength and make
Strengths.
that
Mm,
better?
yeah.
And if your strength is social permaculture, if your strength is diving into that and building teams, then how can you apply this process that we use in permaculture to that?
Yeah.
And what other skills do you need to learn to actually accelerate what you're doing in that social
Mm,
permaculture space as
mm,
well? There's a lot out there.
mm,
For me, constantly learning is really important. So I do lots of professional development every year. I just didn't do one PDC. I've done several. I've done a number of advanced courses. But that's, while it looks good on paper, then I go out on the landscapes and I play with it, or I work with groups, or you know what I
mm,
mean. I
mm,
get grounded in experience, and it's for me. I highly advocate that for the same for anyone. So if you wanted to focus on social permaculture,
mm,
not just look at the skills that you've got, but look at what other courses are
mm,
available through the likes of Robin Francis, Robin Clayfield, even
mm,
Robin McCurdy's about to come over and do some stuff with both of them.
mm,
Another elder within the movement from New Zealand, so she's about to come over and they're going to do a lot of social permaculture space in sort of the southeast Queensland region, which you might find interesting.
mm,
Um, and that's going to help advance you even more with some different skills
mm,
and giving you more to offer. So.
mm.
Michael, in your experience, the projects that you come across that are not relating to individuals or just individual families, are they coming from what government or what level of government, a state,
Not
council?
really. Yeah, it's not really government. It's more either private organizations or individuals who are looking at that larger perspective. It's not so much from government. I do. like I have worked for Brisbane City Council, I have worked for Ipswich Council, I worked for a lot of councils over time, or I've done work for councils. I won't say I've worked for them. It's probably a clearer way of putting it. But they've also got their own agendas and stuff as well, and their own plans, and they will work towards that. And sometimes you might be asked, it might get to a point where you're invited to come in for some of those conversations, and they'll either listen to you or not. They've got their own agendas. But for me, most part, it's usually community groups and organisations that are getting grants to be able to help afford to be able to do something, and then I'm helping them in that space. Rarely is it a larger governmental organisation though.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Oh, listen, it'd be great if it did happen. That would be awesome. Maybe one day. Maybe one day. No. All right. Well, if no one's got any other questions, thank you very much. I hope you got a lot from tonight's presentation. Like I said, I will render this down, edit it, hopefully make it look nice and smick, and then upload it to YouTube so other people can have access to it if you're great with that. And anyway, if you've got any further questions about this subject at all, please feel free to email me. You've all got my email now through that link email that I sent out before. It may take me a couple of days to get back to you. Like I said, I'm quite busy, but I will get back to you and be able to answer the question as best I possibly can. All right. So thanks very much, everyone, and have a fabulous evening.